in this one, I had a little bit more time to play with. So I wanted to slow down my tempo and just really start hypnotizing the audience into this new way of looking at the band. It is still like the same band. The DNA is there. It's just mutated.
I saw the movie. I enjoyed the hell out of that movie. And I realized I kind of like missed the Doomstar Requiem.
Oh, okay.
So people need to definitely see Doomstar Requiem before they see Army of the Doomstar. So
absolutely. Well, that's kind of like, in season 4, I mean, every single season has a purpose. We had, at the beginning of each season, I had an idea of what needed to happen and what we were doing with it. The first 2 seasons were like more of joke stuff. Season 3 was like, I need to develop these characters because I know what the end is. And then season 4 was, we're getting the story started. Doomstar Requiem was very specific. There's a new kind of like, there's some new stuff that happens. What is the Doomstar? You find out what it is in the Doomstar Requiem. It's a musical. It's experimental. And then we go from that into Army of the Doomstar, which is more of a traditional kind of feature narrative with these guys. And it's more of a character-driven narrative too. But it's also got a ton of, it's more of like a dark fantasy kind of that turns into an action movie. Starts as a comedy, moves into a dark fantasy, and goes into kind of an action movie in its third act. So yeah, it's required viewing to see the Doomstar Requiem if you haven't yet.
Yeah, and it's not a spoiler to say like Army of the Doomstar is not a musical.
That is true. Yeah, it is definitely not a musical, and and it was like I thought whatever it was I wanted to do for that musical, I did it with that musical, and I thought this one needs to be like more of a. There's music. I mean, there's music in every moment of the movie. There's so much score, which is another big thing that I worked on inside of this movie, establishing mood and tone. That I just thought there's probably as much music in this movie as there is in the Doomstar Requiem. It's just score.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I was like, holy! Like once I listened to it, like kind of separately, like after you watch it, yeah, just like listen to just the music alone. It's like, oh wait, this is a straight. Like I kind of just thought it was going to be like one of those like musical movies where there's going to be some acting kind of talking, and then we're going to jump into a song. But that Doomstar kind of. Requiem kind of just went straight all the way through, and that was impressive as hell.
Yeah, it was a fun challenge. I mean, I only want to do something that's kind of difficult because I get bored quickly. So I wanted a challenge in the Doomstar Requiem, and I wanted to be able to have a 50-piece orchestra and French horns and strings, and be able to have moments of heavy metal. Some songs that feel like they're classic musical songs. They're moments like big showstoppers and stuff like that. So I love music and storytelling. I love music and storytelling because, I love The Who, I love Tommy, I love King Diamond, I love Them, I love Abigail, I love, Conspiracy. I love all of King Diamond's storytelling. And so but I really do like all kinds of musicals. I like Jesus Christ Superstar. It's really dramatic. I love Evita. All these things that are not heavy metal at all, but I grew up with them, so they live inside of my head somewhere. And I thought, for that project, what can I do? I mean, and I thought, here's the story I need to tell. This is ultimately a rescue story, where we're trying to rescue Abigail and Toki Wartooth. How can I get them there, and how can I develop my characters, and how can I introduce this really important kind of piece of sci-fi lore, which is the Doomstar, which takes on many kind of the Doomstar itself, the star that appears in the sky, that takes on these kind of like magnificent properties and its presence there kind of shifts the whole world into its kind of final place so that the movie can be set up.
Yeah. The score alone is just worth it. Like I say, just like, oh, you can watch the movie, but just listen to the music. The score, like I say, you outdone yourself on the score part alone. But the story overall, it was just, again, I was just impressed from just like, oh yeah, it's like, because a lot of people kind of like, oh, just a metal thing. It's going to be kind of a little campy, cheesy, and it's like I didn't think it was like, oh, this is I don't say it's real, but it's like, oh, this is not a joke. This wasn't a joke. It is a joke, but it's not a joke. You know what I mean?
The whole thing. Yeah, of course I know what you mean. That's kind of what we're thinking, because the whole idea is that we don't have to prove that we're funny at this point. We have funny characters, but this story isn't a comedy story, really. This is This is a story of, it's basically Nathan Explosion's story, and he is a guy where we meet him, and he is in kind of he's in a rough place. He is in a professional and romantic flat spin, and at that point, he's asked to write a song that may or may not save the world.
The Song of Salvation.
And that's the Song of Salvation, right? And what is that? And what does that mean to a guy who's basically spent his entire existence being selfish about being kind of combative, about being kind of like a perpetual teenager stuffed into a man's body. And that's what most of Dethklok is. They're a bunch of these kind of teenagers with these kind of almost caveman-like attitudes. They're like the Lost Boys. They really don't have parents, they're kind of, and in this movie, without supervision, without Charles Austinson, their manager, or without their spiritual guru, Ishnathis who was killed in the Doomstar Requiem, they have to kind of go at it alone. And they have, they do find someone else to kind of help them along the way. And this is a story about flipping sides, about kind of, when push comes to shove, can you really sacrifice yourself and do the right thing? And that is why, that's why this movie had to be made, because without this movie, they're just a bunch of dipshits running into each other. And they're very funny, and they make cool music and all that stuff. But this is like, when you have a TV show, you have to kind of keep your characters in stasis, meaning like Seinfeld doesn't change, or Homer Simpson doesn't change at all until you get to the very last episode, or The Office. Nobody changes until the last episode. And that's what this was. How can I make them change in the last episode? And how can I make this a cool kind of like midnight heavy metal cartoon movie? And so that was the challenge. How can I take this DNA and mutate it into this shape?
Yeah. I saw it, and it was like, even just listening to the, not to get to the album itself, the Dethklok album yet, but just the movie, it was very, I hate saying the word mature, but it's like, wow, these characters have grown up. Yeah, it's been at least, it's been what, almost 10 years since Requiem, and before that, and I didn't realize it was that long. I was like, well, it's been like 5 years. I thought it was like 3 or 4, I thought it was like at least 5 years, and I was like, oh wait, I was 2013.
Yeah.
And it's like, it sounds, the album sounds mature. And even like the way they start at the beginning, Nathan's definitely kind of PTSD'd up. him and Toki are little, him and Toki have kind of like PTSD. Like, it's like, you just see like, oh wow, you kind of feel bad for them almost. And like kind of Pickles kind of had to step up to like be all right, I'm the drummer, but now I have to like kind of be the band leader. Like, like they call him the mother, but he was definitely like the band. He's basically like the heart. He became the heart of the group, I felt.
He had to, He had. I think it's almost like we always thought him as, a band is a family, and we say that inside of this whole thing, and that's kind of another kind of idea that a band is a family, and a band is a family. It's almost like a family of roommates, But in this case, we had to like build it a little bit stronger, and Pickles did have to. He's given one directive in the beginning of the movie to just be a good friend. And what is a good friend? A good friend is a person that tells you the truth, and a good person tells you the shit you don't want to hear sometimes, And that's who Pickles has to be. And we do say that he is I always thought of Nathan and Pickles are like the mother and father of the band, and Toki's the little sister. I thought that's something that we always thought. And Toki at the beginning of this thing went through a traumatic thing that he's not dealing with either. He's regressing like a child, and he's acting out like a child. Squiscar is kind of acting like a bratty teenage older brother. And Murderface has got his own crisis to deal with, because, again, if you see the Doomstar Requiem, you'll see that we do kind of set this up. What's going on with Murderface's arm? It's a big question. So we had to kind of like, again, we had to define what Murderface brings to the table. And it really is something that nobody really talks about, which is the person who shakes their head and says, I don't think so. This isn't good enough, or I hate this, or this sucks. And this is a part of, I think, the creative mind divided into different little attitudes, and Murderface's is the voice of dissent.
Dethklok is basically, you can say there's different, that's everybody's personality. It's like, you can break it down as like, there's a member of each one of Dethklok in our head. Like, there's times where I feel super confident, where I'm like, oh yeah, I could do no wrong. And there's the times that we all have had the imposter syndrome, murder face pop up, and you're
Yeah,
like, oh god, why am I even doing this?
yeah,
Should I even? Am I even worthy of
yeah,
doing this? Like I'm talented. I know I can do it,
yeah,
but I don't deserve it. He's definitely,
yeah, yeah.
definitely
Yeah,
that.
no, I think that's very true, and I think everyone from the people that I hold that I really admire in industry,
Yeah.
favorite directors of mine, favorite writers of mine, they all have crippling self doubt, and that's just a part of it. And you have to take that little character, and you have to take another character and say, don't listen to that character. They are, and you do have to kind of, when there is a voice of dissent, somebody saying, try harder, work harder. You're full of shit. Sometimes it's worth listening to, and how do you make it better? And that's just part of the checks and balances of being creative. That one person kind of like, hopefully, or a group of people can employ to make a project work. So yeah, it's funny. It's all very meta, meaning that like here we are. This is a movie where we have to find the song of salvation, and I personally have to write the song of salvation, and I have to personally write the song that isn't the song of salvation, and I have to make sure that they sound different and feel different. And one of them is saying something, and one of them is a tantrum, a ridiculous tantrum of again, like just of anger fueled at yourself, and that's what aortic desecration is. Aortic desecration means heartbreak. What if Cannibal Corpse wrote a song about heartbreak? And that's what aortic desecration is. But it's self-inflicted wounds, and it's a tantrum, a raging heavy metal tantrum.
Yeah, it's like you kind of felt bad for him, like when they start playing that, like without like spoiling the movie for anybody. Like I
Mm.
know it's not coming out for another few weeks, but yeah, it's like oh man, you just kind of feel bad for him when he kind of has that breaking point. You see, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
kind of we've
Yeah,
kind of had those moments.
yeah,
I'm a drummer self. I played drums in
yeah,
a couple of bands here and there. I remember like the first time I had my super serious, oh wow, this band is signed. We're recording an actual record. And I'm like, cool. Before we get into the studio, everything sounds fine. But the minute we got in the studio, I kind of had like, I've never felt a panic. I never had a panic attack before. And I've had like,
yeah,
holy shit, I'm panicked. It's like, why can't I play correctly? Like I was playing fine yesterday,
yeah.
but now that the
Oh
pressure's on,
yeah,
like I was like, oh, I totally crumbled under the pressure. And I was like, I wish I had, I
yeah,
wish I had a Pickles there to like, what's wrong with you,
yeah,
asshole? And slap me and kick me, like, and like help me get over it. It's like, instead of like, all right, well,
yeah,
just work
yeah.
what you can do right now. Well, this is what you can do. We're just going to work with that. It's like, I wish somebody just gave me that shake or a slap to like, hey, let's get past it instead of, all right, this is what you can do. Cool. We're just going to do that. We don't care. It's like,
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I experienced that too. I really do. Like from when I first started playing guitar in front of people when I was a teenager, I really was not. I was really like having a difficult time. I was really folding under the pressure, and it's really crazy. And I asked myself, why am I? I finally care about something, and why am I? Why is something in my brain freaking out when I have to play in front of people? When all I want to do is this is all I want to do. This is like, why is this fear coming between me and my goal? What is this? And how is it possible that I did this to myself? It's pretty
yeah,
crazy that these are like self-inflicted wounds. But truthfully, I put so much pressure. A lot of us are like in music, especially in heavy metal. There's a lot of perfectionism because from Cannibal Corpse to Nile to Gojira to Mastodon, their playing is really like just dead on all the time. It's major perfectionism to land these songs, to be able to play this stuff live. And truthfully, the reason I thought was okay. There's a lot of good news that I'm terrified about playing in front of people when I was a teenager. The good news is that I finally found something that I care about, and I'm so afraid of failing that I'm failing. But the good news is I care about something now. I finally care about music. I care about this more than anything. I put it above everything else in my life. I really care about it. And then I had to go deep inside and start basically saying I have to develop calluses. I have to like I did on my fingers. I have to do that on my heart now and go in front of people as often as possible and almost like rub salt in the wounds and desensitize myself so that I can just kind of walk in front of people, think clearly, grab a guitar, and play something cleanly.
Yeah.
And that's the life goal. It's something. It's a struggle that you have to kind of deal with all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A little funny note on what you just said. Like on our videos, like on our YouTube and our podcast, we have a song from a band called Salted Wounds, which was my personal band from high school that me and we're all together. And it's like, oh, we use our music as our intro music, and people ask us about it. And it's like, hey, and it's just a demo version of one of our songs. And it's like, oh, we want to hear the whole song one day. And I'm like, I gotta sit down and play that again. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it. But it's like, I have the electronic drum kit here. I was like, I need to just dust off. I need to dust off and build that skill back up, because I do a couple things here and there drum wise, hang out with some other musicians, and I drum tech for like Corey Pierce from God Forbid and his other projects. And it's like, I just, it's like, oh yeah, like I miss playing, but I was like, I hate recording.
Yeah.
I think that might be it.
I gotta say, yeah, I know that same feeling too. I mean, I really do. I remember recording the first kind of like really spending time on the first kind of guitar thing that I really like. I'd recorded a lot of little demos and stuff, but one day I actually had access to a real studio when I was still in my at music school, and I could not get through the whole song. I was just like failing along the way. And my relationship with recording is that I'm the engineer. I'm the I'm actually starting and stopping the sessions on my guitar, playing on leads and all that stuff, or sometimes. But the more you do it, the less daunting it is, and the more you make peace with that click track and find a way to like fall in love with it and go, hey, you're my friend. I can only groove with you. Let's just sit and work it out. It is like, all those things. I think throughout, by the way, we're talking about all these little metaphors that we're talking about are all existing in the movie about.
Yes, they are.
about failing and then having a second shot,
Yeah. That's why I think it kind of clicked a little bit. It just clicked personally. It's like, it does feel like that redemption, but it's like, we can do this. Like, all right, we could just dust yourself up and go.
Well, I mean, the question is, when you have no choice, when every other option is thrown away, you have no choice but to say, okay, I've seen the worst of this. How can I pull myself out of it? And that's part of, I think that's everybody's life, really. And that's why this style of movie, there are a lot of different stories you can tell. There are revenge stories, there are horror movies, there are, mysteries. But this is a story that is called rite of passage movie, which means that somebody has to change their ideology, start the movie thinking one way and end the movie thinking another. And those are some of my favorite movies because they're empowering, I think. In that I feel better afterwards going like, oh, I just experienced the lead of the movie's entire story, and I watched them walk into the wrong situation or do the wrong thing or make a bad decision and have to pull themselves out of it. And can they or can't they? And it really gets dicey, and I really wanted to put the audience into a place where they think that we just may not make it out of here. And so you have to take your entire cast and take them all the way to hell and see if they can crawl their way out and survive. Will they? Won't they? We don't know.
And I know it's been 10 years since the last part. How much from your original, say, draft of this version has changed since Requiem to now?
Yeah, it's we've been working on it for the last almost 3 years, I think. And so yeah, I guess you can subtract that from the time. But truthfully, the story that I needed to tell is the same. The question is, how do I tell the story? And that I think would have been different had I done this 10 years ago versus now. Because in the interim, in that time, while I'm, though I'm not doing Dethklok stuff, I'm doing a lot of other stuff that's really interesting to me, and I'm just trying to grow as a director and grow as a writer. And so, in the meantime, I'm playing with live action cameras. I'm doing video shoots. I'm taking what I like to look at, and I'm categorizing it, and I'm learning how to build these looks, and I'm learning how to build these moods, and that's something I would play around with in the show. but I wanted to really push it farther and slow down the tempo, because Dethklok moves really fast. Every episode's like light speed. Even the Doomstar Requiem, it just starts and it ends, and you didn't know that an hour passed. And in this one, I had a little bit more time to play with, so I wanted to slow down my tempo and just really start hypnotizing the audience into this new way of looking at the band. That is still like the same band. Like I said, the DNA is there. It's just mutated. So Nathan's still Nathan. He's just a little bit more of a character of Nathan than he was before. So that was the trick. And all these little skill sets all kind of came together. And another thing that happened was I slowly but surely upgraded all my kind of scoring devices, my keyboards, my plugins and all that stuff have all kind of been upgraded throughout the years. And right before the pandemic, I upgraded my computer, and I upgraded all my my scoring and synthesizers and orchestral and choir stuff. And it made me just like experiment like crazy. And so between the score, between the directing, between storytelling, I had learned a lot of tricks along the way. And I think the version that I did, I think if I'd done it 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do it this way. I don't think I had this skill set just yet.
I get that.
But the story's the same. When I think about the story, I think I'm owed certain things. I'm owed the conclusion of the tribunal of the bad guys, I'm owed the conclusion of Murderface. I'm owed the relationship between the Doomstar and Dethklok and the bad guys and all that stuff. I'm owed all of that, and I'm also owed a final change where we take. I mean, ultimately, this is a movie about celebrities, and this TV show is about celebrities, inept celebrities that happen to be an extreme metal band. And it starts with all they care about is money. And this movie is about, like, what if music were a religion? And at some point in the movie, it starts. Music has to be a religious experience to kind of do what it needs to do in this movie. So that's what it is, from a corporation to some kind of a religion, Yeah. And Dethklok has to go from being the lords of the manor to servants of the planet. So that's the whole big arc from the very first episode of the show. We meet Dethklok through the servants' quarters. We meet through the chef, who's going to get, blown to bits by the end of the episode. But we follow the chef, who is saying this prayer at the very, very beginning of the first episode. I'm a gear in the wheel of the clock. I fear not my mortality. I will serve to the best of my ability. And it starts out from a very religious place, but there are these people that are worshiping this band. And but the band they're messiahs. They're like these messiahs, but they're dipshits. And they don't know what their role is yet. And they're going to have to learn it in this movie. So all this stuff has been set up for a really long time, and all the DNA is connected throughout the whole thing. I just, had to wait 10 years to finish it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm glad you didn't just. And it's not something you could. I know you've done a few. There's been a few Dethklok comic books, and it's like, if they're canon or not canon, or just like little side stories I could fill in here and there. But this is definitely. I'm glad. Unfortunately, it took this long, but it seems like this long is the right time for it to come out. Yeah,
and I got to say it was pretty crazy, because I knew in 2019 we did a Dethklok show, did a one-off, and I think that was kind of the opening up of the gateway. And shortly thereafter, they said, "Hey, how about this movie? And not only a movie, how about a record? And how about?" And I was like, "Yeah, and a score," because I was really excited about a score, because I love movie scores. And so I said, okay, 2 records and a movie. And so I had the beginning of the pandemic, to start demoing and figuring out what this is all going to be. And so it was kind of crazy good timing to have this project during that time to scrutinize,
Yeah, I gotta say, I'd say, how could I say without spoiling about Murderface, the synth music with his arm. That scene was, that music was phenomenal. I was like, it gave me like, it reminded me of The Exorcist, but didn't hit those. And it wasn't exactly. It's like, oh, it's like I hear a little Tubular Bell-esque sounds here. That just the
Oh yeah,
tonality
yeah,
just like
yeah.
reminded me of it. I was like, oh, that's beautiful.
I'm glad you like that because that was a big part of what I was thinking about. I think about Tubular Bells and I think about Goblin and Suspiria and I
Yes,
think about Tangerine Dream and I think about like all those really cool bands that because that was something between Tubular Bells, I think it started with Tubular Bells, and then I think the Suspiria soundtrack kind of picked up where it left off, and then you go to like William Friedkin's Sorcerer, and you have Tangerine Dream driving with these
yes,
kind of driving pulses that are just kind of pushing the narrative forward, and also it's kind of terrifying too. Then I think about scary score like Jerry Goldsmith from what do you call it? The Omen. That is one of the scariest sounding scores. It's so gothic and big. But yeah, that's driving pulses. And why is that?
unnerving.
What is the instrumentation? Yeah, and why is it supposed to be? Yeah, I really wanted to get like kind of a little bit more subterranean with that and kind of get it a little bit more eerie and fucked up.
Yeah, I that was well done. I was like, oh,
Oh, thanks.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank
it
you.
put a smile on my face. It's like, ooh, and then it's like that's when I really started paying attention to the
Yeah.
score, and I was like, I'm glad that it's also
Okay.
being released separately as well.
Yeah. 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 Well, when you hear the score, you're going to hear it's funny because I had these two albums. One of them I thought is definitely the Dethklok album, where I have all these songs with Nathan singing, and all. It's really brutal, and it's heavier, and it's deeper, and it's more mystical, and some of it's faster and more aggressive than anything I've done. And then I had this record where I thought this score album where I thought, oh, I'm gonna have like the band playing because at some point the score turns to a heavy metal score, so that all stays inside of the score album too. So the production, though, I gotta say, I'm glad that you really are responding to that score album because I really am proud of it. I'm almost more proud of it than anything I've done because I really love film scoring and I really like that I get to manipulate the mood of a movie with music.
Those those are the best.
So
Those are the best. Like film scores
yeah,
are like I think underrated. Like if you don't have a good score on your movie, it kind of takes away from your movie.
oh yeah, no, it can. I mean, look, there are plenty of people that do really great sparse filmmaking, like Sidney Lumet does it, like and that was his whole ideology was don't do anything too fancy, tell the story in a very subtle and great way. I really appreciate that, but I also love John Carpenter. I love
Yeah.
like uh Dario Argento, who really does mix the score. I just saw Oppenheimer, and the score is mixed so loud, and I was like, whoa! I love Hans Zimmer. I love all that. I love the Dune score. I love the new Dune score. I love the original Dune score. But I really love that stuff. And what really got me to it was really exciting about this score was that I've worked with Bear McCreary before. Bear McCreary is known for doing the Walking Dead soundtrack. He just did the Lord of the Rings, that huge Amazon Lord of the Rings. He did
Okay.
that with like a 90 piece
I know him from. I think
90
he did
piece
some
music.
stuff with Buffy back in the day. So like I'm
And
familiar with Bear from his Buffy work.
he did. I got to play guitar on Godzilla King of Monsters that he scored. So me and Gene Hoglan and Brian Beller played a cover of Godzilla, of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla, on that. And so anyway, where I'm going with this is that I had a conversation with Bear before I started this project, and I said, what I need is like I think I need like a team because I want to write everything. I want to like fine tune every single note, but I need a team to kind of help me. And he goes, that's perfect timing. He goes, I want my team, Sparks and Shadows, to work with you on this thing. So I had this really great team in Sparks and Shadows, which is Bear McCreary's production team, his score production team. So I had really great arrangers, copyists, and mixers that all came with this package, and they really elevated everything. But it really is the score that I wanted it to sound like. So in the final mix of it, when you listen to it on its own, it really takes you through the entire journey of the movie without the movie. So it's really dramatic and it's really dynamic and there are lots of different tones. Like I said, there's also Giorgio Moroder, who I love because because I was thinking this is like a heavy metal dark fantasy, and I thought dark fantasy, and I started thinking like even the Never-Ending Story, where I have synthesizers and an orchestra. Because I did get an orchestra. I got the Budapest Orchestra to play with me on this. So when you're hearing strings, you're hearing real strings. When you're hearing French horns, you're hearing real French horns. and then I have all my synthesizers and all my kind of like John Carpenter and Hans Zimmer world of synthesizers and stuff. And then I'm also thinking of James Bond, like John Barry. There are big kind of expansive moments and bad guy moments where I think about John Barry. And then there are also Ennio Morricone, and on top of that, Basil Palladores, who did the Conan score.
All right, on.
And there are moments where I go, okay, here we are into this kind of like, we go into Act 2 and we go into a new world, and this world is the organic world. The world, we left the city and we go into the world of an organic place. And I want the instruments to kind of start getting more fantastical, and some of them are trippier and some are more like fire and brimstone horns. And so you'll hear it all on the score when you sit and listen to the whole thing.
I'm excited for that. Yeah, because like some of my people, it's like I love like Fabio Frizzi. I love like the zombie score from that horror movie. Or like Bernard Herrmann. I think Bernard Herrmann.
Movie,
and Bernard Herrmann. He's one of the goats.
Greats. Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Bernard Herrmann is nuts. And there are moments where there's like, oh, this is the Bernard Herrmann moment. This is me trying to rip off Bernard Herrmann right over here. And this is that over there. And so I definitely think about him too. So it's basically, it's a pastiche of an ode to some of my favorite composers.
I'm sure if they all were still alive, I'm sure everybody would be thrilled with how this came out.
Or they'd hate it. One of the two. Either way. Yeah, you know what? I mean, they really do. Like, you know, there's a whole there are almost two stories being told, and John Williams taught us that too. Is that the heart of, when I think about like the ultimate movie score, John Williams is like obviously the king, and then I think about Empire Strikes Back, or this is a fantasy, and it's romantic and it's gorgeous, and you know that story, that thing that really, like, you've got Luke and you've got Yoda and you've got all this wonderful, gorgeous mysticism, but then when you have Han and Leia, you've got one of the most gorgeous stories because it's a romance story where they don't get to have each other, and it's wonderful. You just feel that pull every time. And then there's just like, John Williams is a king. So lucky to be able to hear his stuff.
Yeah, and you're an LA person, so I'm sure you've probably seen his little symphony shows around when he does all his movie scores.
I wish I have, but I haven't. I just missed them, so I don't know. I better get on it before it's too late.
Yeah. I'll say this, if people aren't familiar with Dethklok, if they have preconceived notions about all of this stuff, this movie, I really think will like, oh wow, this is a very it's impressive just musically, story-wise, and it's like, bro, if you've seen all this stuff, it's like, wait a minute, yeah, like we said, these characters do have an arc and a growth arc here for everybody. And it's like, you kind of don't expect it to really stick at the end, but it does, you know, like even from the beginning, like the way, like just like the Abigail stuff with Abigail, like you kind of expect that to like come around in a more, you know, okay, we're going to do this, how it's going to end. He's going to, you know, but it doesn't go that way. Even I thought, oh, maybe is she going to come back? And I'm glad that the way you did it kept that path. And I was like, all right, that's all that needed to be said, was that moment there. And it was, it's just really impressive. I don't know, there's no other way around. There's no other word about it. I'm just gushing over it because it's like, this is Metalocalypse. It should be like, it's like an adult version of Metalocalypse. And I fucking love that fact that it's like, this started off as a fun cartoon that people thought was kind of silly, and it turned into this thing that become a touring band, a band that puts out great albums. And, you know, it's good for you, man. Yeah, you deserve the credit for this, because you created this, but the people you have to work with you, that's where, to me, real Junior shines. Like, yes, I can write this stuff, I could write the music, I write this stuff, but if you don't have the right people around you export it, like you had Bear, you've had like you directed this one too. Like you didn't direct Requiem, but you directed this one, and I was like, okay, all right. I felt like you were like, all right, I'm in this. Like you like, all right, that I felt like you writing, and that kind of made you. I feel you felt more, not ownership, but
I mean, when I'm writing and I'm making the music, like something like Doomstar, I don't have the time to direct. I'm usually, I mean, that was like such a concentrated amount of time where we'd had to do that. But ultimately, you know, I work with Mark Brooks, who directed that one, And, I have something to say about every single shot. So my fingerprints are all over it, but I didn't have the time to kind of like, really like get into the composition of every single shot. And I love that. And I'm always kicking myself for just being too overworked to be able to do that stuff. In this case, in this movie, I knew I wanted to expand the look. So you'll notice first and foremost that we're in a different aspect ratio. We're in the wider screen, the 235:1, which to me is like, that's the movies. That's John Carpenter. That's Star Wars. That's Akira Kurosawa. When he wants to. Not always, but 235:1 aspect ratio to me is like a big thing. And then I wanted to start, like, we only had, on the TV show. One of the things that makes a TV show affordable is that you reuse characters and reuse the angles. And most of them are at eye level. There's no dynamic angles. You can't tilt the camera down or tilt the camera up without having to redraw your background and redraw all your characters. And this time I said, let's find the time and the budget. So I worked with Titmouse to say, like, let's elevate the look of this. So even if you take all the cool music and the dialogue and the story and turn it down and you just look at it, this movie looks better than anything we've ever done because we tried really hard. I have a really talented compositor that I started working with during this Galacticon live action version, where I started experimenting with practical effects and all these cool things. And I started getting into, and I noticed as we were doing Metalocalypse that if we could spend the time in compositing, we could elevate our look without having to tax animators, having to like really make animators work harder. We could do all the really heavy lifting in compositing. So Brian Weeder is the compositor, and he really is a champ. And we sat there and just worked out every single shot and tried to make it look as cool as possible. And there's some places where you have to go, all right, most of the money's going to go here because I want this to be visually exciting towards the end. I want to make sure there's enough meat on the bone where you're getting new looks and new things and new sequences. And that was another thing too. So, and then on top of that, I wanted to put like a score that was really big and meaningful and, and takes you on a ride as well. So I wanted to combine all these things at the same time. And you can't do that without a really great team. And in Titmouse, and the art director, Arthur Tang, who's just a genius, Brian Weeder, Mike Roush, the animators, Travis Simon, who is the animation director. All these people, we're talking every single day, and we're trying to problem solve, and we're really excited. We're watching the ILM documentary on Disney Plus and getting excited about all that old school kind of classic technique, and we just kind of keep thinking about an analog world, even though we're working in a digital one. So we're trying to make everything look cooler than it has before. We're trying to just scuff it up a little bit too, make it a little bit more interesting. Really think about lighting from scene to scene. Stuff that you can do easily in a live action set, but it's really difficult to kind of articulate and to follow light logic and all that stuff in a scene. So all these little things, we're trying to make them feel kind of cool and dreamy. And that's what this thing should feel like. It's a big, crazy Metalocalypse dream. And like, did I see that? Is this real? So all that stuff is just like, we're kind of thinking of like, to me, I think this is a heavy metal fable, almost like something that you would dream about or an orchestra would play and, and does it exist, doesn't it? Because it's so funny because they're Metalocalypse fans, since the announcement of this thing, that they keep on asking, is this real? They keep looking at like the trailer and the poster and they're like, what is this? What is this? And I'm like, yeah, that's the question. Is this real or is this a dream? And I want people to kind of walk away and go like, this is sticking with me and I'm reevaluating it for that reason. Basically what you said is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I think that'll be the reaction you get when this finally comes out to the public. Like, is there any plans? Is it possible? Are we doing any like any of those fandom events where it could be released in theaters, or is it all just going to be? I don't know if that's affected by the world.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if that's affected by the world as well. So the question is, I mean, the fact that this movie got made is just one of the most crazy things in the world. It really is that we were sitting there. I'm so glad we got it finished before everything kind of went haywire. And I'm just really happy that it's coming out on a physical format as well, too, because I'm a big physical media person. I have a pretty big Blu-ray collection, and I'm just an avid purchaser. And I also love Blu-rays and movies and 4Ks because that's how I learned how to do all this stuff, is through watching, rewatching, listening to directors talk. While I was making this movie, I was watching the master class. I was watching every director talk. I listened to Ron Howard. He said things I was like, oh, that's genius. Thank God I listened to that. I listened to like David Mamet talk about writing. I listened to Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman talk about scoring. So
David Lynch is a fun one.
yeah, David Lynch is awesome too. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love David Lynch. So, and I think David Lynch has a, like, whether or not he articulates this, a philosophy, there's a philosophy of his that I've gleaned, that I've defined in my own terms, that I really like to, but I think is an important thing too. I think he's got like a lot of hypnotic effects going on in his work, you know, and I think that's interesting too. And I think about Stanley Kubrick and feeling a movie rather than kind of, you know, listening to every word, just kind of feeling it wash over you. And that's the mood, and that's the camera work, and that's the cinematography and all that stuff. And even though this is an animated, crazy, bonkers Adult Swim show, we were trying to think in terms of cinematic and like, how can you elevate this? How can you elevate it? How can you punch above your budget? How can you make it look and feel more expensive than it is? Because this is not an expensive movie.
It looks it though, even for animation. I'm like, oh wow, it looks. Like I said, you said earlier, it looks better.
Yeah, there's stuff we've never done. Oh, by the way, of all that stuff, I think we had really great storyboard artists too, which really made it seem bigger and bigger. And so my main thing was, when I talked to the crew and I talked to storyboard artists, I said, this is great. Can we pull the camera back about 20 feet and make it even wider? Because TV can be like, especially animated TV, can be claustrophobic. The scenes can be too tight. It's just a couple of talking heads. And so I said, there's nothing worse than a close-up in our world, because our characters don't look that cool unless we do a very special version of them. How wide can you get? How can you put everybody in the same shot? Again, thinking about Howard Hawks via John Carpenter and stuff like that. So those are the things we were thinking about. We had a big list of things, and what it was a bunch of film nerds collecting every single day and trying to make something cool.
Even the covers, like I gotta say, like the Doomstar, the army of the Doomstar cover for the movie, I love the stained glass like feel, just, and how big and small they are at the beginning. It's like that. Yeah, the leading lines of that stained glass image around them. It's like, oh, there's a little Easter egg in there. If I pay attention to this, wait, is that?
Yeah,
there's a lot of little things in that thing that I know subconsciously. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I know I've seen this. Like, this is, I think that's probably from season 3. There's a little thing there that, oh, wait a minute. Now you gotta kind of want to go back and start over and watch everything.
Well, that's the idea of that stained glass prophecy wall that kind of shows up in the movie. I knew at some point, I thought, this is the poster of the movie. There's a version. It doesn't really spoil anything, but we are in one way or another telling the story in that thing, you know, in that stained glass poster. And also, just, that's their future, that's their legacy. They're going to have to confront all of that, and that's the whole movie. Just like that prophecy wall, I think, is the whole movie. So I'm glad you reacted to that.
Oh man, it's like I'm a big movie poster fan. It's like, you know, like I you know, what was it, Drew Struzan? Like, that was always been one of my favorite. Yeah. I'm forgetting the guy who did the Nightmare on Elm Street covers. I was like, there's been so many beautiful, like, I miss those covers. I tired of these photo, left profile, right profile, like teal and orange posters. It's like, all right, cool, they're boring. And it's like, oh, there might be a cool pose in every eighth one is cool, but something magical. It's like, I enjoy about there's all the Mondo art interpretations of every movie you see online. I love those. Like, that should be the movie cover right there.
Well, that's the idea. You know, I think about that stuff too, because it's the same kind of ideology in heavy metal. Can you make an album cover so cool that sight unseen you may show some interest in it? You know, and that's the idea. When you see, you know, an Iron Maiden album cover, you go, wait a minute, who is this character and what is this world? And oh my gosh, there's that character again in another world. What is going on here? And it makes your brain start moving around, your imagination just starts kind of acting up, and you have to start kind of searching. So you get all these little clues, and it becomes, and you fill in all the pieces yourself. In our case, though, we have like the album cover as well for the Dethalbum IV. That is connected to the story as well. And I haven't really said what that is, but I'm going to leave it open for interpretation. But there's a lot going on in that one too.
How very David Lynch of you. It's open to your, but what do you think?
Well, that's the idea. Well, I think David Lynch does do a great. I think he asks questions and never gives answers.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's part of Twin Peaks, part of all of his work. I think he's asking questions with his camera, or he's just asking questions in general, and they pertain. And I think he's got the answers. And whether or not he does, I am intrigued and I'm participating. I'm not just like being yelled at or screamed at from his movies. He is asking questions, and I'm leaning in, going, "What is the answer? What is the answer? I need to know." Even the new Twin Peaks, the way that it starts out, where there's a person on the couch sitting, and he's looking at a glass box on a wall. So you have two shots. One is the person on the couch, and the other shot is a brick wall with this glass box on it. And we are slowly pushing in on both and cutting back and forth. And I'm going, okay, there's a guy in the thing, and there's a glass box. Okay, all right. We're taking a lot of time. It's like 30 seconds have passed. We're still kind of looking at this box and this glass and this guy. What is their relationship? What is that thing? Who is that guy? And I start asking questions, which means that David Lynch is doing his job. He's asking questions, and now I'm participating. I'm intrigued.
It's very much that you need to put your phone down. Like, it's like, oh, this is a, like, oh, I could just watch this. Down, yeah. I could watch. No, you have to pay attention, because if you like kind of look away from yourself as well, from this movie as well, you kind of, it's like, hey, you waited like 10 years to see what happens next. Like, just put your phone down, just turn it on mute and just focus on this, because I did my best to like just pretend I was in a theater. I have a nice sound system. I was like, just cool, put the field on mute, turn it upside down, just turn off the lights and just turn on the sound system and let's go.
Well, that's the idea, is that, and that's why the intro of the movie is the intro of the movie. I have, like 2 minutes of music while we're showing you something. So that to me is the David Lynch school of filmmaking. And what is this, and where are we going from here, and how slow can we show you this, so that we're not, because I also think when I get into a movie, when I go to a movie theater, or I start a movie, especially though at a movie theater where there is no distraction, it's just you in the theater, I think usually they're shoveling a lot of information in my mouth. There's usually credits, there's usually like a little bit of storytelling that's happening, and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm catching this yet, and there's a character, and you're like, I don't know who that is yet, I don't know who that is, and I can't even track where we are, and it's a lot of information, where I think almost having an overture just gets you prepared, and it's almost like taking a pocket watch and swinging it back and forth and counting backwards, and that's the idea. How do I hypnotize you?
Yeah, it's this movie's like, what you said, about an hour. This is about an hour long movie.
This movie's 80 minutes, so that's the big difference too. Yeah,
you used every minute of it, like that the intro. It's like, cool, it wasn't just like 2 or 3 minutes of just different, like, oh, this company, this, produced by this, with association.
We didn't have any opening credits. In fact, we didn't say the title of the movie until the very, very end of the movie. Like, until the last words of the movie, you see the title of the movie. And only there, and only at the very end, do we start saying, like, who the cast was, and who did what, and who the crew was, and all that stuff. This one is kind of an overture too. And all of the tones and all of the things that you're going to hear later on are inside of those melodies. All those melodies, you won't hear it the first time through. But when you go back the second time, you're going to hear important music that'll happen later on throughout, really a lot. And that's a fun part about composing, is that you can take a melody and interpolate it and do the inverse, the retrograde, whatever you need to do, or just use a chunk, 3 notes of it, and keep on kind of expressing your characters, the path that they're going on through this melody. So you'll hear it at the very beginning, and the first time you hear it, it's a different mood than it is the last time you hear it.
I love that subtleness. Those things are
makes it fun,
and it's fun, like, to see, like, you may not catch it like till like the third time. Like, now that you said it, I'm probably gonna notice it. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. And it's like I've watched it at least 3 times already, and it's like, oh, I'm looking forward to watching it a 4th time now. I'd like to see if I can notice it.
That's good, yeah, that's great. Well, that's what I'm hoping, is that I like a movie that you watch the first time and you go, okay, I'm gonna watch it the second time, knowing what I know now, because now I know where this goes. And this movie has always had to end the way it ended, and this is when you pull back and you ask yourself, what is the story about? This is about Nathan Explosion who has to write the song, but really, it is kind of a relationship romantic comedy underneath everything. And I won't say who it's between because I think the audience needs to discover that for themselves. But it's definitely in there. So there's I also wanted to make dire fucked up moments and moments that make you feel good. And I really pushed both of them. I knew that was going to be the experiment. And plus, I just want to see how much harder can we go than somebody else's movie.
Did you get any like pushback from Adult Swim? It's like, or did you kind of let you have free reign on your final cut?
The only thing I had to really worry about, and this is because we're in this bracketed kind of home video place, is that I couldn't make the movie over 80 minutes. And I wish that I could have, because I think I could have, in retrospect, I think I could have added like 2 minutes into it, really, in a couple places. But that was the only thing I was up against. They were really like, go and make the movie you want to make. And I have to say, it's a terrifying place to be, because you kind of do want to check against, the studio and the authority figures to make sure that like we're all talking about the same thing. But they said, go and do the thing you have to do, make it work, make it entertaining. That's up to basically my own, me and the crews and the people that I work with taste. So on top of that, I have to say one other really important thing about this was that I had someone in my corner who is known for making really great movies. And they were a part of my kind of story sculpting team. I had Janita Tulio, first of all, who I've worked with since Home Movies, and she's a genius. I had Mark Brooks, who is really knows the show inside and out, and kind of, he certainly leads towards like the more kind of comedy stuff, where I was like, this is going to have comedy, but this is going to be a different thing. I had Brian Posehn, who I think is incredibly funny.
Yeah.
And then the guy who I was like, please come and work with me on this, and he said yes, and I was like, fuck yeah, is Andrew Kevin Walker. And Andrew Kevin Walker wrote Seven. Andrew Kevin Walker wrote the new David Fincher movie that's going to be like premiering in Venice, The Killer. He also wrote Sleepy Hollow. I acted in an animated movie that he did, and that's kind of how I met him. And then we became friends, just because I was an admirer of his, and he would like read some of my work and check in on it. And I would just, I'm always kind of like trying to just become better at whatever it is I do, from guitar to writing. And he also just really understands structure. And so having him participating in this project as much as he did was, you couldn't ask for better kind of like guidance, because this dude is funny. He's a great writer, and he really understands structure. And he just, once we kind of got the structure nailed down, he was like, okay, you got a good structure. Now it's up to the direction and like the mood and the tone and the acting and the comedy and all that stuff to like make it work. But you can't fail with this structure. And I was like, yeah, I agree. So I would like, and if I was in production, I would be asking him questions like, hey, I think I'm in a place where, because I can't go over this amount of time I have to tell the story, which means I have to sacrifice something else. Let's talk about it. So he would join me and we would talk about this stuff, and ultimately leave it back to me to make a decision. But I would get a really smart person who has been here many times over to help out, or at least to listen to me, or to like give me some indication. He'd say like, well, if you realize if you do this and you don't get that over there, and I go, yeah, I know, but or I'd pitch something and I'd say, what do you think about this? And I'd take his words very seriously, because I think he is a major craftsperson.
He was your pickles. That's so sweet.
Whatever he was, he definitely and I'm also like, like I said, when I pitched this story to these people, like on Zoom, during the pandemic, to this team of people, I basically said, listen, I'm going to pitch something. This is going to be different than what we've done before. It's going to be a little bit more dramatic. It's going to be a little bit bigger. It's going to be more like intense. It's going to be deeper, all that stuff. And I want you to tell me that I'm out of my mind. You think so? I don't want you to just kind of like say that I know what I'm doing, and I do. I mean, there is like some part, Dethklok lives inside me, and they're telling me what they want to do in some way, and I'm just going like, okay, but we have to be careful. We have to set this up the right way. We have to really kind of build a whole entire new universe out of the parts that we already have. So that was the fun part.